Hi, boys and girls. I am so happy to be talking to you. I'm really sorry that we can't be in person doing this lesson, but I guess this is the next best thing. We're going to read the story Because of Winn Dixie together. That's our book club book that was in the plans to do after spring break. So we're going to be starting today reading chapter 1 in the book Because of Winn Dixie. Now, I hope that you were able to get a copy of the book because you know it's really important to me that you follow along with the words. I'm going to be reading the book to you, but I want you, it's very important that you follow along with the words because that helps you learn new words and just see maybe some unusual words as we're reading, okay? So Because of Winn Dixie, it's one of my favorite stories. It came out when my kids were little. And we read the book together and saw the movie together, and it was just a fun book to read together. So that's what I want to share with you. I want to have this experience with you. So today we're going to be reading chapter 1, and Because of Winn Dixie. There's a few words up here that I wrote down that might be unusual, our vocabulary for chapter 1. We've got preacher, which is kind of like a Father Scott. He's a leader of a church, but this is a different religion. And so the preacher in this story is allowed to be married and have children. So we'll be talking about the preacher, and he has a daughter who's the main character in this book. Her name is Opal. We'll get to her in a little bit. Then we've got the word produce. Now that could also be produce, like to make something, but in this story it's produce, like if you're at the grocery store and mom and dad say, meet me in the produce section, where would you go? If you were to meet them in the produce section, where would you go? You'd go to the fruit and vegetables. That's produce, okay? The fruits and vegetables area is produce. Then we've got manager. In this chapter, it's going to be talking about the store manager, and he is in charge of the store Winn Dixie. Some of you may have seen the grocery store Winn Dixie in the South, like around in Florida. There might still be some around. You know where there used to be a Winn Dixie here in Louisville? You know where the Hobby Lobby is, just right up the street? That used to be a Winn Dixie, but then it closed. But Winn Dixie is a grocery store, okay? And the manager is in charge of the Winn Dixie. Then we've got pound. And the pound, that's a multiple meaning word. It can mean a lot of different things. It could be how much something weighs. But in this case, they're talking about a dog pound where dogs who don't have homes go, okay? And finally, we've got the word cashier. That's somebody that checks you out at the grocery store, okay? They're the ones that ring up your groceries. So those are our words. One other thing I want to show you is a picture of a trailer park. Now, this is going to be a little bit difficult for you to see, but they're going to be referring to a trailer park, and this is what that is going to look like, okay? So we'll pop back to that, but just kind of get that image in your head. That may be something you haven't seen before. Okay, so let's get our books open. Chapter 1, Because of Winn Dixie. Now, I'm going to talk like Opal, and for some reason I feel like she has this southern accent, so that's the way I'm going to use her voice. And that's one of the reasons I love to do this book, because I love to read using those voices, okay? So I was so upset when I thought, no, I can't do my book club book, but then sweet Miss Smith was like, let's do a YouTube channel, you can do it. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm going to be reading this to you while you're following along. So go ahead and open up your books. Chapter 1, it's page 7, okay? But chapter 1, it's important you follow the words. Got it? Okay. Chapter 1. My name is India Opal Baloney, and last summer my daddy, the preacher, sent me to the store for a box of macaroni and cheese, some white rice, and 2 tomatoes. And I came back with a dog. This is what happened. I walked into the produce section of the Winn Dixie grocery store to pick out my 2 tomatoes, and I almost bumped right into the store manager. He was standing there all red-faced, screaming and waving his arms around. Who let that dog in here? He kept on shouting. "Who let a dirty dog in here?" At first, I didn't see a dog. There were just a lot of vegetables rolling around on the floor, tomatoes and onions and green peppers. And there was what seemed like a whole army of Winn Dixie employees running around, waving their arms just the same way the store manager was waving his. And then the dog came running around the corner. He was a big dog and ugly, and he looked like he was having a real good time. His tongue was hanging out. He was wagging his tail. He skidded to a stop and smiled right at me. I had never before in my life seen a dog smile, but that's what he did. He pulled back his lips and showed me all his teeth. Then he wagged his tail so hard that he knocked some oranges off a display, and they went rolling everywhere, mixing in with the tomatoes and onions and green peppers. The manager screamed, "Somebody grab that dog!" The dog went running over to the manager, wagging his tail and smiling. He stood up on his hind legs. You could tell that all he wanted to do was get face to face with the manager and thank him for the good time he was having in the produce department. But somehow, he ended up knocking the manager over. And the manager must have been having a bad day, because lying there on the floor right in front of everybody, he started to cry. The dog leaned over him real concerned and licked his face. "Please," said the manager, "somebody call the pound." "Wait a minute," I hollered. "That's my dog. Don't call the pound." All the Winn Dixie employees turned around and looked at me, and I knew I had done something big and maybe stupid too, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't let that dog go to the pound. "Here, boy," I said. The dog stopped licking the manager's face and put his ears up in the air and looked at me like he was trying to remember where he knew me from. "Here, boy," I said again, and then I figured that the dog was probably just like everybody else in the world, that he would want to get called by a name, only I didn't know what his name was, so I just said the first thing that came into my head. I said, "Here, Winn Dixie." And that dog came trotting over to me just like he'd been doing it his whole life. The manager sat up and gave me a hard stare like maybe I was making fun of him. "It's his name," I said, "honest." The manager said, "Don't you know not to bring a dog into the grocery store?" "Yes, sir," I told him. "He got in by mistake. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "Come on, Winn Dixie," I said to the dog. I started walking, and he followed along behind me as I went out of the produce department and down the cereal aisle and past all the cashiers and out the door. Once we were safe outside, I checked him over real careful, and he didn't look that good. He was big but skinny. You could see his ribs, and there were bald patches all over him, places where he didn't have any fur at all. Mostly he looked like a big piece of old brown carpet that had been left out in the rain. "You're a mess," I told him. "I bet you don't belong to anybody." He smiled at me. He did that thing again where he pulled back his lips and showed me his teeth. He smiled so big that it made him sneeze. It was like he was saying, "I know I'm a mess, isn't it funny?" It's hard not to immediately fall in love with a dog who has a good sense of humor. "Come on," I told him, "let's see what the preacher has to say about you." And the two of us, me and Winn Dixie, started walking home. And that's the end of chapter 1. So just like to recap what happened in chapter 1, think about what happened, and I bet you were making pictures in your mind. Because we're reading a chapter book, they don't have the pictures like they do in a storybook. So you've got to create your own pictures. So imagine like what Opal looks like, what Winn Dixie looks like. Picture the chaos in the grocery store. Just make all those pictures, because that helps you understand everything that's happened. So Winn Dixie is a dog. Winn Dixie wasn't that dog's name, but Opal gave it to him. Called him Winn Dixie because he was just causing a hullabaloo in the grocery store. And Opal was afraid Winn Dixie was going to get sent to the pound, because the manager said, "Send that dog to the pound." She said, "No, it's my dog." And she said, "Come on, Winn Dixie," and that's where their friendship formed. She was rescuing him from a fate of going to the pound. So now they're heading home to introduce Winn Dixie to the preacher. The preacher is actually Opal's dad, but she calls him the preacher because that's what most people call him, I guess. But that's her daddy, and she refers to him as the preacher. And she's going to take Winn Dixie home to the trailer park. I showed you that picture a few minutes ago. That's where they live, in the trailer park. And she's going to introduce Winn Dixie to the preacher and beg him to let Winn Dixie stay. So we're going to see how that goes in the next chapter. Think about, make your predictions. What do you think the preacher's going to say? You know, what do you think he's going to say when Opal says, I found this dog, Winn Dixie? What do you think? Make your predictions, okay? All right, now what I want you to do is we're going to be doing this after every chapter, but I want you just to take a blank piece of paper. You're going to write across the top, because of Winn Dixie. You only have to write because of Winn Dixie on the first one, but I want you to put chapter 1, and after, on each paper, you'll put what chapter it is, okay? And then down at the bottom, now I drew a little line, and then just put a sentence or two. On mine, I said, Opal finds Winn Dixie, a dog, at the grocery store and decides to give him a home. Now you can put whatever sentence you want, but you want to give like the main idea of the chapter, okay? So that's a pretty good summary of what happened in chapter 1. On this big blank section, I bet you can figure out what you're going to do because you're smart kids. You're going to draw a picture of illustrating what you decide to put down for the summary, okay? So on my picture now, I didn't draw it, but I could put the chaos in the grocery store. I could draw a picture of Opal and Winn Dixie walking, whatever you want to help you summarize chapter 1. Now you want to draw it in pencil first. I at least want it done in pencil, sketched out, okay? If you have time, you can color it in, or if you just want to, you can color it in, that's fine. But remember, you can outline with marker, but big coloring, big sections, you want to do with crayon or colored pencil, okay? Now I'm going to be getting a hold of these, so I want you to make sure you're doing a good job, okay? That's one of the things that you'll be graded on, is how you keep up with all of the information. There's 26 chapters in this book, so you're going to have 26 of these papers, okay? So that's your work that you're going to continue working on until we meet again tomorrow with day 2 of book club, and we'll be reading chapter 2 together for book club, okay? All right, I miss you people so much, you just little babies. I can see you sitting in the seats here at school. I hope you're doing well with your work, doing your very best. I know it's a different kind of situation, but you can do it. You're smart kids, you're good kids. You can do it. All right, thanks. I'll see you next time.